in Young Art 2013, The Story of Me. And for those of you who are not aware, this is an exhibition of kindergarten through 12th grade work from students throughout San Diego County. And Young Art is a long-standing tradition at the museum. The museum's been exhibiting youth art in one form or another since the early 1930s. So we're really proud of that. And this exhibition actually represents the 42nd biennial exhibition of youth art in museum history. It's a big deal. Now, Young Art is a collaboration. It's a collaboration between the educators and students of San Diego County and the museum. And the way that we work together is the educators and students are given a yearly theme, and they take that back to their classrooms, develop projects, and then submit works to the museum in the hundreds. And the museum staff works with a jury panel that also consists of outside artists, educators, and art education representatives. And together we have the very tough job of narrowing down all of those submissions to approximately 150 that will go on view here in the museum. Additionally, this year we have a satellite location at the Center for Community and Cultural Arts at the Jacob Center for Neighborhood Innovation. And there we are exhibiting an additional 50 student works. Now, alongside all of the work by students, we have works from our collection. This year, 14 in total in both exhibitions. And the tie-in between the student pieces and those collection works is always the yearly theme. So the Story of Me explores personal identity. It's this idea of artwork that expresses the self. And of course, there are a lot of ways to do that. And as we walk through today, you'll note the diversity of interpretation among the works that the students themselves created and that we found from our collection. So one thing we found when we received all these submissions, not surprisingly, was with that theme, the Story of Me, we received a large number of portrait works, both traditional and non-traditional. And that's obviously an easy subtopic to tie in with our collection, and you'll see that in the exhibition and really those connections throughout the museum. So those collection works are chosen ahead of time, and they begin for us what will be the exhibition. That's sort of our starting point. But it's when the students' works are made and when those pieces are submitted to the museum that it really further defines what this will look like. And so it's really the educators and the students that help shape the Young Art exhibition, and the works that they create make it what it is. And for that reason, for today's ArtStop, I decided to kind of mix things up a little bit, and I'm going to be looking at 3 unique student examples. And they weren't hard to choose, or they were hard to choose, but I will tell you that the 3 works that we're going to be looking at today and the artists who made them are represented in an audio tour that we created for the exhibition this year. This is the first time in Young Art history we've done this. And so if you really like what I have to share, I encourage you to listen to the full audio tour before the exhibition closes. You'll hear from 10 students in total about their pieces. Now, within the exhibition, we have elementary, middle, and high school work. So I thought it only fitting to choose an example from each of those grade level areas. So we're going to do that today. We're going to start out of order, and we're going to start with this work here. This is a work by a middle schooler. Now, this piece is called Pop Art Self-Portrait by the artist Christina Vu, who, because of the audio tour recording, I had the privilege to meet. And Christina is, I would describe her as a very polite and poised 8th grader from Stella Maris Academy in La Jolla. And here Christina has created, as it says, a self-portrait. And obviously not her first. She's very good at what she does. I can tell you this is a very accurate likeness of Christina. And actually, she talks in the audio tour about how much she enjoys working from observation. So she is an artist who likes to create what she sees, and her image is one of her favorite subjects. One other thing that she talks about in her audio tour recording, which I really enjoyed hearing about, was she feels this work represents her artistic development. So she explains that physically, this is obviously showing her development. She is depicting herself as she looks now as an 8th grader. And then, as she puts it, mentally, she's moved from being a young artist creating, she says, dragons and flowers. Now she's making self-portraits. So for her, the art of the self-portrait is an elevated art form, and she feels very good about her ability with that art form. And I think we can second that. In terms of her process, she is using the medium of printmaking, more specifically a linoblock print. So she talked a little bit about how she does that in the audio tour, but to elaborate, she took an image of herself, a photo, as a reference, and from that she recreated it on a linoleum block. And this is sort of a rubber material, you know, kind of what you pull from your kitchen tile, although you can buy it in an art store. And she carved into it. Now, what she has carved is the outer edge. So the image that you see, the face features, the hair, anywhere where the ink lies is actually the area that is raised on the block. So the uninked spaces are the areas that she's actually carved into. And then she printed that with colored ink on colored paper. And I know this is obvious, but I want to mention it because she made a big point of saying she loves color. Bold, solid, strong color. And she told a cute anecdote in the audio recording about being a young artist and taking her colored pencil and rubbing it really hard to get that deep, intense color in every part that she colors. And I love that image because I remember doing that myself. I think we all do. And so that carried through and has carried through into her work as a middle schooler. Now, you've probably picked up on this already. There's an influence here with this composition, an influence from the art history world. And Christina talks about this. Another artist who loved working with bold color and the medium of printmaking, Andy Warhol. So Christina talks about being familiar with his work before she made this, and then being reintroduced to him and his work for this assignment. And Andy Warhol, if you're not familiar, is an artist from the 20th century, a painter, a printmaker, a filmmaker, who is most associated with a movement known as pop art. So there's that direct tie-in with her title of pop art self-portrait. Andy Warhol is probably most well known for his silkscreen images of celebrities done in compositions very similar to what Christina's done here. So if you've seen any of his work, it's a very clear tie-in. Now, he did enjoy the art of repetition, which Christina mentions, and before he did those silkscreen images, he was experimenting with other forms of printmaking, including hand-painted lithographs. And I have an example of one from our collection. It's just a photocopy, but you'll get the idea. This is a 1955 work from our collection called Happy Butterfly Day. I bring it in to connect her work with the wider museum collection. Also, to mention that this piece was actually sort of the center stage work from the collection in our Young Art 2011 Making Multiples exhibition. And I just thought that was a fun tie-in. It made me think too, if Christina had submitted this same work that year, it probably stood a good shot to get into the show. And I love making that connection for her. So I'll pass this around, you can see that. Another work from our collection, Flowers, a lithograph from 1964, pretty well-known Warhol image. Again, that bold use of color, that use of repetition that both Christina and Warhol so enjoy. So we're going to stop there with her work, but I'll mention before we leave this room that this first entry space is meant to serve as sort of a sampling of all of those interpretations of the theme. And we're going to enter this second room here, which is a little more specific, but loose. And so the works in there are about community, tradition, and family. And when I say family, I mean people and pets. So we're going to go in there and we're going to look at a work by an elementary student named Finley Wise. Again, not easy to pick just three, and I hope you have time after this to take a further look at the other pieces. So again, I wanted to select a work from the elementary grade level. So this work is called Map of My Heart, and as I mentioned, it's by an elementary student, Finley Wise, who is a sweet and funny fourth grader from the Gillespie School. Again, such a privilege to meet all of these young artists and have the chance to talk with them. And as I said, the title is Map of My Heart, and there's a funny moment in the audio recording where Finley tells us the title. She says, well, the title of my work is Map of My Heart, and then she giggles a little bit and says, and it's a map of my heart. Sort of the obviousness of it strikes her as funny, and I love that moment, so I encourage you to listen for it. But it is pretty obvious, I think, to all of us what we're looking at. It's a visual representation of all of the things, or at least most of the things, that are important to Finley, that she loves and sees as having value. Now, I will say she had to leave a lot of things out, she mentioned, including Disneyland, so imagine it's in there. One of the other things I love about this piece is it reminds me that as artists, not just young artists, but artists, I think we find it easy to be authentic and honest with what we create when we're creating about something we love and value. And so when Finley and I talked about this, it felt to me like it was very easy and natural for her to talk about it and to pull other ideas out because she felt so connected. And I really love that about it. As she says, it's about the things that she loves, and she says, I really, really love bulldogs, as you can see. Sloths are her favorite animal, and lizards are up there too. So just wonderful things that I think we can all connect to and understand. As far as her process, it may be obvious, but I'll mention, she is working with watercolor and pen. So she describes this in the audio tour. Starts with a pencil sketch, maps it all out, and then she covered it in watercolor and then finally outlined it with Sharpie marker. And I just think, for me, it's interesting. I looked back at this piece yesterday and discovered some elements I hadn't noticed before. For example, it struck me as interesting that in this assortment of items that are important to her, she has Ringo Starr, the Beatles, and England. And of course I connect all those in my head and think, what is that influence there? And I wish I had her in front of me to ask her more about that. And it made me think too, if I created my own map of my heart, what would I include and what would all of you make of it? So just really wonderful to think about. This is obviously a symbolic portrait. So we saw Christina's more traditional print portrait. Finley is giving us a symbolic portrait, so we don't see her face, we don't see the human form, but we know the story of the artist because she's telling us in a different way. And throughout the Young Art exhibition, there are a lot of examples of symbolic portraits, both in the student works and the permanent collection. So in just a second, we're going to turn the corner, and leading our way to the final room where the last work that we're going to look at is located. You can't miss it. You'll see a large, colorful print by contemporary artist Jim Dine, who was a big fan, or is a big fan, of creating symbolic portraits and using repeated and personal motifs, a bathrobe being one of them. So let that lead our way to that final room, and when we're in there, I will share with you the work that we'll look at from the high school level by an artist named Clover Clemens. We're looking at a work by Clover Clemens, who is a high school student, a 12th grader at the San Diego School for Creative and Performing Arts, located in southeastern San Diego. And Clover, as you can see, is very comfortable with art making. Clover is showing us a work that she's titled Self-Portrait, and it's a mixed media work, representational, and I can tell you from having met Clover, it's a very accurate likeness of her, right down to the expression and the nose ring, which you don't catch right away, but it's in there. And Clover is, I would describe her as a well-spoken and friendly girl. As I mentioned, very comfortable with art making, very comfortable talking about it, and seems to be very comfortable revealing herself through the art that she creates. I'll give you an example. She described for me that the assignment that they were given was to create a self-portrait and encouraged to use pieces of their sketchbook collaged into it. Clover decided to take it a step further. Since this was a piece about identity, she explained that she felt it only appropriate to take pieces from her own journal, from her diary, and incorporate them into the work. And so for her, her diary, her handwriting itself was part of her identity and really her signature. And that, of course, made me want to look at it, although I felt a little like I was intruding when I was reading it. But she's inviting us to do that, so don't worry. In doing so, I discovered she really does have very unique handwriting, including, it seems quite intentionally, for only the letter E, she turns it backwards. So, you know, it's obviously something she's crafted and cares about, and really it's kind of part of her art making. So I thought that was a wonderful inclusion. She explains that she loves working with color, although she claims to be new to working with color. I think she's got a pretty good handle on it. And she's excited to continue exploring color. Some of the artists that she admires, she mentions Van Gogh. She also mentions an artist named Daniel Miriam. Now, when she said that name, I wasn't familiar with the name. When I looked up his work, I recognized it. I'm going to show you in a second, so I don't mean to tease, but just give me a moment. I mentioned this because I thought it was a fun little investigation that I did. I wanted to see his work and see if there were any connections. Clover said that both of the artists I mentioned are artists she admires, but she didn't see if there was any influence by them. Van Gogh, I think we can connect some color influence. Miriam is a contemporary surrealist, I guess we could call him. He creates fantastical imagery, mainly a watercolorist. Now, this piece is a mixed media work, but if you look closely, there appears to be some watercolor used in this. Not only, but some. So there's that connection between the two artists. But then what I found most fascinating, and maybe I'm just looking into this and trying to find something, is when I looked at his work, and here's an example, and I'll pass this around. Clover mentions about creating her image. She said, I meant for it to look like me, but I changed a few things. I distorted it a little bit, including I broadened my forehead. And so when I looked at Miriam's work here, I saw for myself a real connection in the features. The broadened forehead, the eyes, the nose, in particular the mouth, I felt was small and sort of puckered in the same way. So for me, I don't know if it's intentional or maybe subconscious, but I think that in a way she is honoring this artist that she so admires in her work and finding some connections in her exploration. If you'd like to hear more about Clover's work from Clover herself, and can't underestimate the impact of hearing these artists' voices, it really is wonderful. You may do so in the audio tour. And as I mentioned, it includes 10 works. The audio tour will be available for the exhibition through the close, which will be, the last day will be this Memorial Day. So through the end of Monday, the exhibition will be open. I've tried to give you a small sampling of what is, I consider, a very multifaceted exhibition. I hope you've enjoyed this taste, and I hope if you come back, you'll enjoy it more. So thank you so much for joining me, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
So the audio tour is available at the front desk? Is that the one?
Audio tours are available.
Not the online.
It is online.
Both.
Oh, good. Enjoying the company.
It can be accessed through the website. We have iPods available at the front desk, or if you have a smartphone, you can actually download it onto your own device. And that will live on beyond the exhibition too, which is an exciting feature. Usually Young Art closes and we just remember it, and that's all we have are our memories, but this is really nice to have this for the long term. Thank you.